All right, people, happy to see you all. How wonderful. So just thinking if we're going to be a little hour and we're going to just touch on a few things. It might come from questions. It might come out of my mouth. We'll see what happens. And think of it as, hear it as tools. Hear it as advice. You mightn't have to take the advice, but it is advice. It's like practical advice. So try and hear it as that. And if you do decide to, even 1% that works, go for it. You can be a 1% Buddhist, no problem. So I think I'll leave it open to everybody else now to ask me questions. I think that's the best way to go. So does anybody have any burning issues you'd like to bring up coming from your daily life? Any dramas, any concepts, any thoughts? What have you got, people? Anything? No? Or I'll start and then you can ask me some questions, I think. It's just to remind us. The words are incredibly simple, but it's incredibly hard for us to do it. The job of being a Buddhist, the actual job, not looking like a 14th century Tibetan person like I am, not, doing prayers, not shaving your head, not doing mantras, not doing prostrations, not having an altar, not having a picture of the Buddha, not saying prayers. That's not, they're tools that help you do the actual job. So the actual job, the words are so simple, but because it's the opposite of what we do, we can't hear it. And that is to change our mind. So then you ask, well, change your mind. That sounds good enough. I can decide to have tea instead of coffee. I just changed my mind. Well, good start. Okay. Is to change your mind from, and this is the Buddhist model of the mind, to change your mind from deluded, neurotic, disturbing, distressing, miserable, fear-based, unhappy states of mind. And we mightn't think of them like that, but that's a very easygoing way of putting the Buddhist approach to them, the Buddhist take on them. And what are they called? Well, they're called attachment, they're called anger, they're called pride, they're called jealousy, they're called depression. We mightn't think of pride. You don't go to your therapist if you're feeling proud. You go to your therapist, because you're feeling depressed, because the materialist world has discovered certain chemicals in the body that if they're unbalanced, you can fix them with a chemical and a drug. So then we think, oh, now we've discovered a disease and it's called depression, and we'll go to a therapist for that one. We'll get a pill. But I don't think they've found a pill for jealousy, and I haven't found a pill for anger, and they haven't found a pill for attachment, and they haven't found a pill for pride. So for the Buddhist approach, they've all got the same status. They're all states of mind. They're not the chemicals. They're not the brain. They're not the genes. They're not the DNA. And they're not the fault of your mother, your father, your grandfather, the person next door, your boyfriend, or whatever it is we think might be, or the chocolate cake or whatever. So the Buddhist approach is there's the outside world and then there's the inside world. Now, we know there's an inside world, but we're very convinced that what goes on the inside is caused by the outside. We're very convinced about that. Look at how we think. Look at how we say things to people. We put it on other people, But this is the hardest part, because people do bad things to us. There's no doubt. It is a fact. People do bad things to us. They do bad things. But the Buddha's point, if we're brave enough to hear it, he's saying, this is too shocking for us. It's too shocking, He's saying, that's just the catalyst. But we say, well, it takes two to tango. It's two people, and I'm going to do my part, but you bloody well better do your part, we think. We insist the other person looks at their role in it because I'm feeling what I'm feeling because of what they're doing. But the Buddha says you don't need to do that. You don't need to look at what your mother did to you. You don't need to know what your friend in the relationship is saying. You don't need to know what your boss is doing, even if your boss is a creep. That's not your business. This is really hard. This is really, really, really hard because we don't think of it this way. We have to look at our mind. That's it. That's the job. The person might even be wrong. Your boss might be a creep. That isn't the point here. This is where it's so difficult, and this is where it takes such courage, but not just courage, it needs intelligence. We're not that intelligent, frankly, because we're so addicted to our own take on things that the other person has a role in this, and I'm insisting on you listen to my view and you tell me what I'm telling you what you're doing wrong, and you need to play you're playing a role in this. I'm sorry, you say to your boss, you play a role in this, and I need you to look at yourself. That's not your job. This is very hard to hear. It's not our job. If we're really doing the Buddhist job, really doing it properly, which is the quick path to happiness. If you can't handle it, there's two things. If you can't handle the boss, leave. If you decide you're going to stay with the boss, you work on your mind. Not on the boss. You work on your mind. This is almost too impossible to work. Everything in us will fight with that. Everything in our bones will fight with that, you know. People have been Buddhists for 30, 40 years, or in Buddhist centers, all trying to work and serve the Buddha and serve the Dharma and blah, 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 blah. And they have their dramas and they insist on talking it through and mediating, and you did this and I did this. And we're convinced, and this is our world in the West, we have to share, you know, we call it sharing. It makes it sound so holy. I've got to share what I feel, and then the boss has got to tell me what they feel, and then we'll sort it out. You fix your bit. No, that's not how it is. That's not this is the most powerful one and the hardest one to do if we're brave enough. And that is just look at our role in it. And if we decided to stay in that job, then we change our mind. This doesn't mean you don't get out there and politically activate. It doesn't mean you know, what's the word, whatever the verb is. It doesn't mean you don't get out there and do political action. It doesn't mean you don't do that. But the best practice, the best, most direct, most powerful, most amazing, most radical is to look into your mind and see the attachment. And then when your attachment doesn't get what you want, it's called anger. And when you're insulted, it's called pride. And and the other person's being treated better, it's called jealousy. That's it. They're the names of our problems. Our boss is not our problem. Our boyfriend is not our problem. This is too shocking to hear. It's too shocking to hear for us because we want it to be a sharing thing. You know, we think if I'm going to work on my mind, the other person better work on their mind too. We better both talk about it. No. I mean, when I ran the prison project, I had like 9 full-time staff at some point. I had some pretty wacky people talk, you know, employed ex-prisoners, an ex-junkie, you know. One would sit at my door, pounding on the door, screaming and yelling to let me get her in. Really kind of wacky people. I don't mind wacky people. I enjoy wacky people because I'm wacky. And they'd come with their dramas, you know. And Mary, I mean, this is just make up names. Mary would say, well, Fred did this and Fred said that and Fred did this and Fred did that. And I know Fred, and I'm not surprised Fred did do that. But I'd say to Mary, maybe Fred did do that, but what's going on in your mind? What's your job? I never got them to talk to each other. I never mediated. I never, ever, ever, ever. I got them to be a Buddhist and look at their mind and change their mind. Now, if you can't, and it's too difficult and you can't, then you change the situation. You've only got 2 options. There's only 2 options when it comes down to it, precisely 2. If you can't handle the job, you leave. But that's too much for us because we think, what do you mean I should leave? It's my job. They should change. So then we start to politically get involved, and then we start to go behind backs and we complain to HR, and then blah, 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 and blah, 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 and then we all become victims and we all go crazy. I know it sounds kind of brutal and shocking, but this is the ideal. If we can do it, if we can do it. You either change the job or you change your mind. That's it. That's the entirety of life. If you can't, like my friends in prison, they can't get out of prison, so they change their mind. That's it. That's it. Bottom line. That's it. So if you have any questions from that, I would love to hear them. That's being a Buddhist. It's too shocking, isn't it? It's too blunt. It's too, it seems like you feel like I'm probably not including everything, but you analyze. It's the best. Whiz to enlightenment. If you could, the best one is change your mind. But if you can't be forced to, because sometimes it's too difficult. When the external condition is so strong, and you have the luxury to be able to leave it, but you see, our trouble is we don't think we can leave it. We think, why should I leave? The boss is wrong. What do you mean I should leave the job? Well, if you can't handle the boss and he's not going to change, Buddha says, if you can change something, please change it. But what if you can't? So you've got 2 options. Change the job or change your mind. There's nothing else to do. And if you can't change the job, like my friends in prison can't open the door, then they have the courage and the unbelievable, amazing emotional intelligence to change their minds. That's it, you know. So it's almost so simple. It's too much. It's too much to bear when we start to think about it, you know. It's too much to bear. But that's it. Anyway, any questions from that, please? It took me about 10 minutes to say that. Now you have some questions. Ask some questions, please. And you could argue, until we start changing our mind, we're not being a Buddhist. You could argue that. You could say that. Until you start working on your mind, you're not being a Buddhist. Until you identify your delusions. Which delusion is it that's causing me the problem? But we don't even think it's our delusion that's causing the problem. We think it's the other person. And this is the point. No one's saying the boss might be a creep. The boss might be a bad boss. They might be wrongly treating you wrongly. It's absolutely correct. Look at the world. Look at your lives. People treat us terribly. Bad things happen. Join the universe. So if you can ask, if you can change the situation, If you can get to be different, then fine. If you can't, then you have to change your mind. You don't have an option, or you leave it, one or the other. You change it, which is fine, but the best one is change the mind, because that's what practice is. Literally, when you hear Lama Zopa teach all day, every day, night after night, years after years, and all he ever does is this job. This is the job. This is the job of being a Buddhist. What's going on in your mind? Work on your mind. And if you're suffering, it's called a delusion. This is too hard for us. It sounds so brutal. It sounds so shocking to say it, So then, yes, Brian.
Hi, Venerable.
Hi there. Hi, darling.
I have a personal question I wanted to ask you. When you first met the Lamas in Queensland.
Yes, that's right.
And it was your first exposure, and sort of like the light went off and it seemed very logical to you, and that was the path. Did you realize at that point how difficult and hard it would be to change your mind, or was it something that...
No, I understand. I didn't know. I just know so strongly that when I first heard the teachings, one part of me was well, no, I did, Brian, because from that second of meeting those teachings, it hit me completely. It started me on the job of having to change my mind. It was incredibly and powerfully difficult, because already my view, it completely attacked at that moment in time my political views. I'd been a radical feminist, a really serious activist, serious, 100% committed. So suddenly there I was in the situation where the monks sat in front of the nuns, and where I heard all this very typical traditional kind of Tibetan patriarchal way of saying things. I mean, even at that point when I was editing books, I was always using they and she. This is like now 40 years later we're doing it, 45 years later, but I was doing it back then because I was a radical feminist then. So already it was attacking me, and it was incredibly difficult. I couldn't see it in the beginning. Of course I didn't, but I knew this is where I belonged. I knew, and then when the thing that kept me going, was the recognition that the mind, because the idea of reincarnation karma made total sense to me. It felt like a missing piece. So then I realized, and even in the processing I had to do, I knew I had to do, because I had to, that my mind was who I was. Even my female body wasn't who I was. I wasn't a lesbian or this or a gay person or whatever. At that time I was a lesbian. Before that I wasn't, a lesbian. I'd only been into boys. So, I mean, it was like that wasn't defining me. They were, I knew that was a secondary thing. Even being a female was a secondary thing, that my mind was the point. So that was very powerful for me. And then the idea of changing the mind. But of course I didn't understand. Of course I didn't. You don't understand until you meet it, And you don't understand the difficulty of the job to be done until you meet the job to be done. But I was sincere in my wish to do it. And I knew it, understood it theoretically. But all these years of being a Buddhist has been every single second is daily work. And you keep getting ever more subtle at the job, ever more subtle, until eventually you've cut everything from the mind. So this is a job from the beginning. So no, of course I didn't. But I suppose I was prepared for it, because I knew the philosophy was what I wanted. So I was prepared for the fight and prepared for the struggle. And I think my teachers, because I committed to Lama Yeshe pretty much fairly soon, and I trusted the idea of having an expert. Lama Yeshe for me was the expert. And I trusted that even though the very first job he gave me, it was like it was an atomic bomb going inside me. I mean, I thought I was going to run this publishing company, because it was my experience all my years. I've been doing publishing. And I felt I'd found the purpose of my life. My whole life had like been an apprenticeship. I'd always been on the propaganda side of things, since a kid with my father in our printing business, and then I was a hippie, then I was a radical feminist, always on the propaganda side. So I was in heaven. The first job I began to do was editing. So I assumed this would be my job, and I was going to run this particular activity. And then Lama Yeshe wrote a note and said, Robina can be the secretary. I mean, I can't describe to you, I've discussed this before, I can't describe the shock. There's absolute shock. I didn't label it pride. I didn't know the meaning of the word pride. I didn't know, but I knew I trusted Lama, even though he had me by the scruff of my neck. And I knew my mind was the problem, even though I ranted and raved and kicked and screamed against it, I knew I trusted Lama Yeshe's wisdom. He put me in this job. So he forced me to see that the job was to change the mind. He forced me, absolutely. But I wanted that. I'd chosen Lama Yeshe. So pretty soon, it was like I was in my face. Lama was chucking me in the deep end to get me to see my shitty mind, not being horrible about myself, to get to see this is why I suffered. Why did I suffer? Because I've got attachment to certain views. Why did I suffer? Because anger would arise when attachment didn't get what it wanted. Why did I suffer? Because I felt I was being insulted, which is called pride. And it's hard to see these words because they sound so shocking to us. So I think I was so fortunate that I had a wise teacher. I'd chosen the karma with a wise teacher whom I trusted to help me see my mind, And I didn't have to have meetings with him. I had very rarely had a meeting with him. I just trusted him. He put me in this job. So I assumed that's what I had to learn, you know. The hardest thing I ever did. So it was a long answer, but are you hearing me, Brian?
Yes, that was fantastic. Thank you.
Okay. So, I mean, I was, you know, so it was so courageous of Lama. He sort of didn't pussyfoot, didn't soft pedal with me. He threw me in the deep end, you know. I was going nutty with my I mean, I was berserk in my mind, my anger, my pride, I mean, I can say those words now easily because we don't think it's that. Because I mean, at the time in this job I had, I was convinced this person that Lama had appointed to be the director of this particular activity. It was Wisdom Publications in my very beginning. This is my personal story, you know. And I just knew it was my job. I had all the expertise. I knew I'd done all this in my life. I was in bliss. And then I heard that Lama had appointed this other person to be the director, who was a complete hippie peanut. He knew nothing about anything. So I nearly went mad, completely convinced that Lama didn't know what he was doing. But although I knew he was doing, what he was doing. I kept thinking, poor Lama, he doesn't understand. I was convinced it was him. But I mean, I knew it was in the end me, but it was like raging against it. And I persevered, you know, I persevered. I mean, that was one thing. I mean, Lama must have seen my virtue, seen that I had the perseverance and the wish to work on my mind, but it was intensely difficult. I mean, I almost feel embarrassed when I talk about how I behaved back then because it sounds shocking to people because I'm a very volatile kind of person, but I was raging in myself. Why doesn't Lama see that it was my job? Why doesn't he see that I'm the person who's qualified? This guy doesn't know what he's doing, and he didn't. So that what I've learned years later, both Lamas Zopa and Lama Yeshe, they don't give you the job that you're good at. They give you the job you have to learn. Not the external job, the internal job. So if you're really courageous and know you have to have your hands in your own SHIT, or as I put it, eat your own vomit, then you should want to have a job where you got to see your mind, not the other person. You know, this director, all I did was rant and rave about him, how he this and he that and he this and he that. I wasn't looking at my mind, but I didn't know how, in the beginning, I didn't know how to do it. But I somehow trusted, I persevered, you know, struggled and struggled. For 2 years, I couldn't stand this fellow. I wanted to kill him. I wanted to rip his legs out. I wanted to rip his penis and his balls and his legs and his arms from limb to limb. Please excuse me. I wanted to. I swear to you, I was a maniac. I don't have people put up with me. I mean, I was also a nice person. People tell me I was a nice person as well. And I worked hard, like 80 hours a week, doing Wisdom Publications while I was also doing 40 hours a week studying. So I was in bliss, you know. But I persevered. And this person, I couldn't stand the sight of him. I hated him. I threw teapots at him. I can't describe to you. I mean, I'm confessing here in public. But every night I'd close my door and do my prostrations and cry and weep to the guru to bless me to see my mind, you know, to see my delusions called anger and pride, mostly those two. And Lama so kindly put up with me, you know, and all my friends put up with me. And then one day, after 2 years of hating this guy, Lama came to visit the center where we were at the time in England. And I took Lama needed to use the phone. So I took him to my office to use the telephone. And he cracked a joke about this person. And I said, oh, Lama, I don't hate him anymore. Because that morning I'd woken up and decided I didn't hate him anymore. Because I'd worked intensely hard on my mind for 2 years, looking at trying to understand that anger, trying to get past the conviction that he was wrong, you know, which is what happens, what we do. So, you know, how kind Lama was putting up with me. So there's a long answer, Brian. I mean, people are shocked when I talk like this because it sounds so un-Buddhist, you know. But there you go. That's why I like my friends in prison. They're all maniacs, you know. That's why I can handle maniacs working for me. I'm not scared of violence. I'm not scared of wacky people. Somehow it's just as well. Do you understand, Brian? So we shouldn't, that's what I've learned. Half of our suffering is that we can't stand all the pain inside us. We feel bad and guilty about it. We've got to have the courage. That's why we need a good friend, a good therapist, a good anything. I don't care, to let us support us in the holding of our garbage, you know. And if it all vomits out, that's all the dirt coming out. That's the dirt coming out. Be happy about it. We've got to see it instead of acting like perfect little Dharma practitioners and speaking with a soft voice. Give me a wacky prisoner any day. Do you understand? Anyway, there's a long answer to your question. It was confession time from me. Look at it. Okay, thank you.
I have Ace has a question, and then Kim.
Yes, Kim. Tell me your question, darling, Kim.
Venerable, first of all, I just want to say your candor, your honesty is so endearing. I love. But I would, it's an assumption, but I would think that you early on also struggled with the patriarchal lineage.
No, I didn't. That part was not a problem for me ever. Interestingly, that was not a problem because Lama Zopa and Lama Yeshe, both, I mean, they're traditional Tibetan monks educated in that system, but Lama Yeshe especially had this remarkable, amazing ability to be completely understanding and empathetic with the hippie Western view. And most of his people that he hired to do things were females. He understood this automatically. And this is always in some people, if you read, say, Tenzin Palmo's experience with her Lama, it was very painful because she was around all these Tibetan monks and got rejected. But from the very beginning, all these hippies, and Lama Yeshe was the boss at the time. Lama Zopa wasn't much the boss. So Lama just, his secretary that he hired, one of the nuns, this young nun, she was 23 and totally gorgeous. He got her to be his secretary. He even traveled down to the monastery with her as his secretary. He probably got a terrible reputation. He didn't care. He saw your qualities. And so for me, it was never that. And even though I'd been this radical feminist, that was not it was a struggle in a way because of just the traditional way of writing and the structure of the way the teachings were presented, because I was an editor, right? But the way Lama was with people was completely not sexist. And I really, truly mean that. He was utterly quite unique in that way. So
do you think you kind of lucked out?
What? Well, not luck. No, it can't be luck. I understand what you mean. Yes, very fortunate, because many people in the West are not the same, and with their teachers who don't speak English and who are very traditional. That's exactly right. I was very fortunate in that way. But what I got from the very beginning, Kim, at the teachings, when I really thought it through, because I decided if Buddhism was intrinsically patriarchal, if it's patriarchal in its bones, then it is not a possibility I would stay here. I would have to have left, but only because of the view of karma and the idea that we're not really in our bones, male, female, dog, human, or anything, that our mind, which is beyond all of those, is who we really are. That's what got me to persevere. And that enlightenment is a possibility for whoever you are. That's for me what sustained me. And then knowing all those years that now it's our job in our culture to adjust, not to change the fundamentals, because if the teachings are universal, they're beyond male or female. If anything is universal, it's not male or female or heterosexual or homosexual or anything. It's fundamental truth, and I knew I wanted to find that essence. And then it's our job in this culture to frame things in a way. This is what I'm feeling. It's my job. Lama Zopa told me to do this job in 1987, to find a way to speak these fundamental truths in language without insulting the stuff, without chucking the baby out with the bathwater, but to present it in ways that we can all communicate with. Because if it is universal, it can be expressed in whatever language you like and whatever culture you like, if it's universal truth.
Thank you. Makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Yes, Ace. What's your question?
Hello, Venerable Robina. Nice to see you again.
Yes.
Thank you for your teaching.
Good.
I just have a small question.
Yep.
Yeah, so I saw a video of your teaching and you talk about the attachment to laziness.
Okay.
Can you understand? Okay. For example, if one person asks you to do a job and you tell him, I don't bother to do that job. So I can relate to that laziness.
So what's the question?
So can you explain how we can conquer that laziness?
Absolutely. Good point. No, it's a very good. So even I would say not so much that we're attached to laziness, Ace, but actually laziness is as a result of attachment. So let's describe it. It's very, very helpful to describe this. It's very interesting. And it sounds kind of brutal because, I mean, laziness sounds like a rude thing to accuse a person of, oh, you're so lazy. And so, okay, they teach it especially in the more advanced practice of the bodhisattvas. And this is what's interesting. And the opposite quality of laziness is actually, they call it enthusiasm. So it's a really good way let's unpack this now, Ace. Okay, so now let's look at this. So the very first, and they all say in the teachings, and we know this in general in our daily life, if we want to achieve something, then what we need is enthusiasm, or they even call it joyful effort. So even just use the word effort. Let's look at this. There are 3 levels of laziness. The first one, we've all got it. It's the most fundamental one. We've all got all of them. The most fundamental one is the obvious one, and that is can't be bothered. So let's analyze what can't we be bothered doing is the thing that takes effort. So of course, forget the ordinary daily life things, like, getting, all the samsaric things. This is talk about if we just, no, this is meaning in our practice, you can't be bothered. So the thing we can't be bothered doing, even just think in our ordinary life, the thing you can't be bothered doing is obvious. It's, oh, it takes too much effort. So what we'd rather do is, this is the grossest laziness, to sit back and stay in our comfort zone. And I mean physical comfort zone, but not just physical, mental comfort zone. It's too much. We all know logically that to learn anything you don't know how to do, even in ordinary samsaric life, to learn anything we don't know how to do, it naturally, logically takes effort, because you've got to squeeze your mind, you've got to squeeze your body, you've got to learn to make effort. So just I've got a lot more to say, Ace. So just turn off your mic and just relax and listen. Because I'll take 10 minutes to answer your wonderful question. Thank you so much for bringing it up, Ace. So the very first one, of course, the approach here in the teachings is not even in relation to, the daily jobs. We're just talking ordinary life here, but we're talking only in terms of our practice, to give up our laziness in relation to doing our practice, to give up our laziness in relation to working on our minds. But forget that. Even we understand it in ordinary daily life, it'll help us understand. So we can see we can't move 1 inch in anything at all, any endeavor in life, if we don't make effort. And that is going against attachment. So this is why, Ace, attachment is the most primordial problem, because it's this comfort zone. And if you think about it, just even physically, even if just use the ordinary example of going to the gym, you decide you want to get thin. This is an ordinary samsaric activity. And you get all excited in the beginning, and then suddenly the third day, and it's a bit chilly, and then you go, oh God, I can't be bothered, and you'd rather sink back in your television seat and watch the television and eat popcorn. So this is very deep inside us, this inertia that can't be bothered. And the reason is because of attachment to our comfort. Now, the next level is even more it's a tricky one. The next one is like we're lying to ourselves. You say, I can't be bothered, but then you say, oh, I'm too busy, I'll do it later. This is called procrastination. I think this is our worst suffering. I mean, the things we put off doing, even the things that we want to do, but we lie to ourselves. If we simply say, oh, I can't be bothered, at least we're being honest. But when we say, oh, I'm too busy, I'll do it later, that's a lie. In other words, what it means is we haven't prioritized it. We haven't made a priority. And of course we'll say, especially you go to a retreat, you go to a weekend course, you get all excited and you decide, I'm going to practice every morning. You get all enthusiastic. And the first morning you get up early and you do your practice. The second morning you get up early, you do your practice. The third morning you kind of, oh no, and you think, and then before you even know it, you're kind of saying, oh, well, I can't be bothered. But then you go, oh, but I'll do it later. And in other words, you're lying to yourself and you're making yourself feel better. But the fact is, later never comes, ever, ever, ever. And this is, if you think about our ordinary life, we put off doing so many things. And this is the greatest sadness. You end up having such regret at a wasted life because we say, oh, I can't, not just I can't be bothered, but the next level, I'm too busy. I'll do it later. But the fact is, if you decide, you prioritize your practice, let's say every day, and you put that 30 minutes, you budget it into your timeline for your day's activities, get up in the morning, have my shower, get dressed, do my practice, have my breakfast, go to work. But if you suddenly don't prioritize it, you'll be skipping over it and saying, I'll do it later. But it's really a lie. We lie to ourselves, and it's very quick. It's really quick with the things we don't want to do. So the thing you procrastinate doing, exactly the same, is the thing that you can't be bothered doing because it takes too much effort. But we complicate it and sound like we're being noble. Oh, I'll do it later. No, we won't. Later never comes. I swear to you, this is procrastination. Now, the third one, it doesn't sound immediately like laziness, but this is the most powerful. Especially when it comes to achieving our goals. We're talking about our spiritual goals. And that could mean our lifestyle. Let's say, I've decided I've got to leave my home. I've got to go to another country. I want to do this. I want to have that. I want to have a particular relationship. I want to do this job. And it all just seems impossible. And we will say, no, can't do that. I'm not capable. Not possible. I'm not capable. And that's the worst lie of all. because we don't even consider the possibility that we even want to do it. This is our biggest thing. And I've talked to you about this, Ace, and we've all got the same problem. We keep ourselves very small. We don't have enough courage to really say, I want to achieve that. And I'm talking here, not I want to kill 6 people. I'm talking about doing something virtuous and ethical and growing ourselves so we can be a benefit to others. Call it spiritual or whatever you like. And that might mean I've got to leave my family. It might mean I've got to leave my country. It might mean I've got to change the way I see things. But when we're very stuck in our culture and stuck in our family and stuck in what we think other people think, we don't even have the courage to think, I want that and I will do it. So that's the worst laziness of all. That's the one that holds us back from achieving our goals. So because we don't even have the courage to think, I want it. As soon as we think, oh, I'll leave the family, leave my home, leave my husband, leave my children. No, I can't do that. It's impossible because there's 16 different things occur in my mind. No, I'll get insulted. No, my family won't approve. No, I'll upset people. I can't do that. But we don't even have enough courage to say, I want to do that. Therefore, we don't aim for it. Therefore, we don't have courage. That's the worst laziness of all. So that's my answer, Ace. Does that help?
It sounds so true because my problem was
recognize all of it.
procrastination.
What?
And
What?
my problem was procrastination.
That's right,
Was the
exactly.
first one, and the
That's right.
second one,
The first one is can't be
Yeah.
bothered. The second is procrastination. The third is,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to big goals. Oh, I can't do that. It's too much effort. I can't
Yeah,
achieve that. I'm not capable. That's the major one, Ace. That's the biggest one. We've got to have courage.
Thank you very much, Vanilla
Right.
Robina.
Thank you,
I
Ace. Thank you.
appreciate
Very
it.
good question. Thank you, darling. What else, people? Anything about the earlier point I made about working on our minds, seeing that's the main job? Nothing. People, any questions about anything? It's okay. But the one I was talking about first is the hardest one. It's the hardest one because the trouble is, you see, because of delusions in their nature are completely preoccupied with the outside, with the other person, with the other object, with the cake, the thing, the person, the event, the house, the smell, the taste, the object. The delusions rush out like magnets to the outside, and then those delusions describe the outside, and then that delusion describes that the outside is the problem, and we're very articulate with that. But that's not what we're trying to describe. We're trying to describe the delusion itself. We need to learn to describe the story that delusion is saying. We need to see the lie of the delusion. It's good to describe your boss. There's nothing wrong with saying your boss is a creep. He's this, he's that, he does this wrong and that wrong. And you might be very correct, but that's not your problem. That's his problem. Your problem is the attachment to your way of doing things, and when attachment doesn't get what it wants, when he does what you don't want, and then that's anger. So the description of your boss is the story that anger tells. So the lie we have to look into is the anger and the distorted story it's telling us. And then we have to go deeper from beneath the anger into the attachment and see how that story is this main voice of the frantic little I, and how that isn't getting what it wants. This is a hard job. We can hear the words, but it's very hard to do the job. Like Brian's question to me, I knew the job was to see those delusions, but because they were so rampant and so violent and so directed at the object, and because we see the object through the lenses of the delusion, it's very hard to look at the delusion itself. We're obsessed with the object and we are convinced we are right. Like with Lama Yeshe, this boy who was the director, I was right in seeing that he wasn't a good publishing person. I was correct. And that's what I thought the issue was. But it wasn't the issue. Lama put him there directly to help me see my anger and my pride. And that's what took me time to see. That was the reason Lama gave me that job, to help me purify my mind, see that my delusion. So in other words, what I had to do was to learn to hear the story that anger told, to hear the story that pride told, to hear the story that attachment was telling. And that's the part that's hard. That's what takes us time. This is not modern psychology. because nobody does this. Why should they? Freud didn't talk like this. Jung doesn't talk like this. Buddha talks like this. It's so direct, it's too shocking for words. And then when you realize that anger and pride and attachment, and these are the three that always seem to be our problem, maybe jealousy, add jealousy to that, they're conceptual stories that identify, that describe the object. So there's two things. One, it was accurate. My assessment of this boy who was the director was accurate. He didn't understand publishing. It was a fact. But I couldn't tell that from anger. I couldn't distinguish that from anger. And I couldn't hear my own pride in my offendedness that Lama couldn't see that I was the better person, because I was more qualified. It was a fact. But that wasn't Lama's concern. Lama's concern was for me to see my mind. And that 2 years later, when I'd said to Lama, Lama, I don't hate him anymore, Lama took my face and gave me a big kiss. He was blissed out because he saw that I'd been practicing Dharma for those 2 years. And finally, the penny dropped. It took me 2 years, you know. So it's not an easy job. This is the main job. The internal job is the main one. The external one is just the means to the end. But it's so hard. I mean, I go around all the Buddhist centers and the dramas that people have and the fights that people have and the accusations and the belief that they're right and he's wrong, and because we forget this is the main job and it's the most difficult. It's really quite, I'm not trying to say I'm so clever, but it's taken me all these years to see it, you know. It's just the most difficult job on the planet. We need merit and humility and courage to see it, you know. And that is the recipe for sanity. That is the recipe for happiness. Because the boss is not the reason I'm you know, he was not the reason I was suffering. I was convinced he was the reason. Absolutely convinced. He was not the reason. My mind was why I was suffering. That's it. It's extremely hard to see. Even when it gets to things like, you know, these young Tibetan nuns, always is why I tell that story. These young Tibetan women sexually abused and tortured in prison for several years in Lhasa. And they were invited by Richard Gere to this conference that he had for 20 former prisoners. I mentioned this many times, back in 2003. And Richard Gere decided to he'd invited the Dalai Lama to New York. So he invited all these ex-prisoners, all of whom had done some kind of Buddhism or some kind of meditation in prison. And I was working with the prison project at the time. So he invited people like me to come. You know, it was a very moving day, this conference all day, these prisoners all talking about their suffering and their dramas and the racism and the sexism. And this is true. It's all true. It's all true. They are treated badly. It's not just because your mind has a certain role doesn't mean the other things aren't happening. Of course they're happening. Injustice is happening in Tibet. People are abused and tortured and raped every day. And I mean, more than a sixth of the Tibetan population has been slaughtered by the Chinese communists. These are facts. Saying your mind is the problem doesn't mean that that's not happening. It doesn't counteract it. So he also invited 2 young Tibetan nuns. And they were talking about their suffering. They'd been raped, they'd been sexually abused and tortured in prison, right? And you could tell, this is the thing that's interesting, you could tell how they talked. They weren't angry because they have the view of karma, you see. This is something huge for our culture because they have a reasoning why things happen. In the modern world, we don't have a reasoning except to say it's the person's fault. That's the only reasons we have, you know. So they have the logic of karma, which is in the bones of their being since they're tiny. It's just the way the world is in Tibet. I mean, for 3,000 years, the view of karma has been in the world, you know. And so these young women were talking about their suffering, but they weren't angry because you see, anger is saying this shouldn't be happening. We might dress up anger as polite, but we've got to see it's anger, because you don't shout and yell doesn't mean you're not angry. It's criticism, finding fault and believing you're right. This is happening and that's happening and he did this and he said that. And it's mixed with this anger, this fix that it shouldn't be this way. How dare it be this way? This is a mistake, you know. We're very tricky with our minds. So these young women didn't have that because they didn't say, they weren't pulling their hair out and going crazy saying, why is this happening to me? Which is the energy of anger, outrage, shocked. Because they knew why. They have a logic, they call it the logic of karma. So that also informs their compassion. So at the end, as one of them was crying, there was tears, they were sad. And then one of them said, and of course, we had compassion for our torturers, because we knew we must have harmed them in the past. And because they will suffer in the future because of the causing of their suffering to us. You know? So in other words, the view of karma, we've been talking about that this weekend in the center. The view of karma is the basis of all Buddhist practice, because it completely shifts your role. It causes you to have accountability. It causes you to not blame. It causes you to not feel like a victim. It causes you to have the courage to know it's your mind, and you even created the cause to meet the rapists. This is so shocking for our culture. We can't hear this. And that's why they could say, and of course we had compassion for our torturers. So we can't have that level of compassion for our torturer or for our mean sister until we have known our own mind and our own pain and our own attachment and our own depression and our own anger and our own pride. That's the first level of practice. It's so intense, you know. Yes, Hilary.
Venerable, do you have any advice on how we can best be, a good friend? Say you're listening to a friend or a family member who's, maybe talking about their problems and very, very won't let go of the storyline at all, no matter.
Exactly. Of course, that's all of us, darling. It's just a love. I mean, you've got to have the wisdom to hear what they're saying. And most of the time it's just, I understand. Oh, I can't imagine you're suffering. I understand. You love them. But if you've got enough wisdom to hear, there's maybe some space in there for discussion to get them to see their own mind. In other words, be a good therapist. Really what you're trying to say. Hang on. But if there's no space, you can't do anything. So you can't, there's no point in giving lectures. You just have to have the wisdom to be able to hear their words and hear beneath their words, is there space in there? Because sometimes a person will just rave on for days and hours and years and will never let go. Then there's no benefit in listening. You're a kind cut. Oh, I understand, mummy, darling. I'll ring you next week. Bye. You've got to sometimes do that. There's no benefit in hearing. It's not good, you know. Just, yes, I understand, mum. See you later, darling. Because this is the greatest pain. We can't let go. We can't let go of our view. We're convinced our view is right. We are convinced. This is the nightmare of ego. Whatever the view is, if we're convinced we're right, then that's fundamentalism, and that's the suffering of all the delusions, you know. It's very hard. But the kindness one can only come, the wisdom can only come from you knowing your mind and seeing your delusions, and then that can inform your ability to hear the other person well.
Sure.
Yeah. Thanks, Hilary. What else, people? What else? Anything else? It's an interesting topic today. I always sneeze when I talk on the Zoom. Maybe it's Zoom that does it. Maybe it's my light. I don't know what it is that does it. Maybe it's all this talking. It gets all the mucus moving. I've got no idea. Excuse me. Think of some questions. Come on. Yeah, people. Nobody. Yes, sweetheart, talk to me. Yes, Beth.
This sounds like ridiculously simple. Is the opposite of just being either attached or angry all the time? It would almost seem to some people just freaking boring for some people to just go, I'm just content. Like,
I know that sounds like flatlining. It sounds like completely boring, doesn't it? But a person who is content, see, this is where we have to really understand attachment at quite a deeper level. Attachment is like I always talk about, it's like multifaceted. But one of its key energies, which is the one that drives everything, is we're never satisfied. And the thing is, we can use that skillfully as we understand. We can use that like to help make things better. That's good. But in the beginning, it's just this primordial energy of never being satisfied. And if we've got a sharp, quick mind, that turns into criticism, right? So then we want it, we're convinced it's, can fix it. So contentment doesn't mean passivity. Contentment means within yourself, you're content and you're flexible and can work with what's out there. But it doesn't mean you're passive and then put up with garbage, because if there's garbage there and a person's doing some harm, you'll be able to be very proactive, but it'll be part of your skill. It won't come from anger, but it'll come from intelligence. I always think of Martin Luther King. He said, it is good to find fault, in a sense, to be angry. But then you say, what can I do to fix it? What can I do to help? So contentment doesn't mean you become passive. Contentment means you're joyful in yourself, but you can still be proactive to make things better and get out there and demonstrate and help other people. There's no contradiction. It doesn't become passivity. But we hear it that way because it's much more nuanced than we think. Are you with me, Beth? Good, 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 good. What else, people?
Barbara, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, good. Talk to me, Barbara.
I do. The question I have is to do with emptiness.
Okay, good. Okay.
All of these delusions,
Yeah.
until I understand emptiness, is that when they all go away?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there's a major shift at that point. You've still got more work to do, but that's a major, major shift when things will appear tremendously different to us. And we won't be driven as usual by the attachment and the aversion and the fears and the jealousy and the dramas. That's when the major shift will happen. Yes, yes, yes. But it's a gradual process. It's not as if it's overnight. So you don't go from being a maniac to being blissful. You know, it's a gradual process. So you could argue that one of the more on the, you know, it's like a spectrum. The delusions in their nature are fundamentalist. That's a really nice term. They're very fixed. We are very fixed. When we've got strong attachment, we're very convinced that that is right and that's good and that's not good. Then we get angry easily and have aversion for the thing that isn't what we want. And then we run between these two. So you can see anybody in this life who's got very fixed views. That's fundamentalism. It's not just political views and you know, views about religion. It's actually everything. Even a person just this is the right movie. No, that's the right movie. No, you're wrong. Look, why do you think people fight? Because attachment is very convinced that I'm right. My view is right. And then I have my glasses on and the thing will even appear right to me. And then you're just a plain idiot because you just can't see what is right. That's how we all are. That's why we fight. That's why we go crazy. That's why we get divorced. That's why we kill each other in wars. So delusions in their nature are narrow-minded and fundamentalist. So as we progress, loosening the grip of attachment, which is what I want every second, it enables us to get less angry, you know, because then we will start to greet the problem and literally interpret it differently. So that leads us to the realization, to get to the root delusion, which is the one that is literally is the root, which is what is which is counteracted by realizing attachment. But how you practice that in day-to-day life, His Holiness Dalai Lama was asked, and it's so simple. The answer is profound. A person said, how do I apply all this view, this emptiness in particular, into daily life? He said, it's simple. You simply learn to see something from another point of view. That's what the spaciousness of wisdom is. Ignorance is one end and wisdom is the other. And wisdom is this capacity to see things differently. And then a person comes along with a different view. You might be right and it's okay, but you're not fixed with it. And you can see where they're coming from. You can see what they're saying. So as soon as we can see things from another point of view, our mind is radiant. Our mind is joyful. Our mind is not disturbed. That's the point. That's like it's a gradual process. And then every second you're loosening the grip of your attachment. Every second you're loosening the grip of your pride. Every second you're loosening the grip of your anger. You're moving towards understanding the ultimate way that things exist, that nothing has an intrinsic nature. It's all how we see it. So that's why in the practice, in all the more radical practices in the Mahayana path, where we learn, as Lama Zopa says, we need to learn to love problems learn to like problems like we like ice cream. In other words, we have to literally reinterpret a problem. And this sounds insane to us when you've got a fundamentalist mind. That's like an impossibility. But what do you mean? It's wrong. Even, you know, to hear, this is where we can't hear the nuanced, it's a mixture of correct, like Martin Luther King, it's good to see the fault. So let's say talking about racism at that time was fairly evident, wasn't it? So then suddenly you hear, you mean I've got to see it from another, you mean I've got to see the white person's point of view? Well, that doesn't make sense. If they're wrong, if they're racist and they're hanging black people in the tree, you mean I'm supposed to try and see their point of view of why it's good to hang black people from a tree? Doesn't make sense to us. It just seems too weird, but it's not a question of that. It's not a question of that. You don't try, but you're seeing, yeah, it's very painful when somebody is abusing us, when somebody is screaming at me, when someone's raping me. What do you mean I'm supposed to see something from another point of view? Now, that is interesting because I remember a movie, a documentary with a woman years ago. Some of you might have watched it. I can't think of her name. I think she was English, and she was kidnapped and kept for several years by these mob of terrorists. I don't know who they were. And she was raped and abused daily. And she talked about her experiences of how she learned to literally do that, to see things from another point of view. So when you hear her talk, she's quite reasonable. She's quite sane. She's quite empathetic and quite stable. She didn't go completely crazy. Now, this sounds too shocking. This is exactly the same as my friend Sonny in prison. You know, I think of two people at the same time. I read about Sonny on death row who was innocent. I read about this other dude on death row who was innocent. Now, the dude, was a typical person with attachment, anger, delusions, pride, jealousy. It's not criticism. It's the interpretation of the Buddha why we suffer. He was what we call normal. He went out of his brain. He went mad. In other words, he didn't have a millimeter of a chance of ever seeing his mind and knowing that his attachment and anger were the cause of his pain. This is too shocking. And therefore, he couldn't change the way he saw things. Sunny had that ability. I mean, she's not even a Buddhist. I don't mean that insultingly. She's a nice Jewish lady who did yoga. But she had this extraordinary emotional intelligence, is the way I put it, that she knew she didn't have a choice. She said, at some point, I realized I could not change anything, but they couldn't take my mind from me. So she learned to change her anger, to literally, and that means reinterpret her scenario. This nightmare of being on death row, she'd lost her children, her husband had been executed. His head burst into flames when she went to the execution. You can't imagine the nightmare of one after the other, these nightmarish events. But she was able to change the way she saw things from another point of view. That's what giving up attachment, giving up anger, giving up pride means. So she stayed sane and stable and empathetic, and she never stopped working on her freedom. She didn't become passive. Whereas the poor other guy, because he was out of his brain, he couldn't do anything about his freedom. He just went ranted and raved. This is the nightmare of how we suffer in the world. I find these very powerful examples. Are we communicating here? Whoever asked me the question, Barbara, wasn't it? Yeah. This is intense stuff. I mean, this is like heavy duty stuff. We're big girls and boys. We can hear it though. We're grown-ups, you know. We do our best according to our capacity. One step at a time, one step at a time, one step at a time. Yes, Maddie, you look like you have a question. No? It's time to go soon.
Just had to scratch my head, that's all.
Oh, I beg your pardon, okay. Okay. I mean, this is hard to say this stuff because it sounds like you're blaming the victim. This is the dynamic we have in our culture. But it's not that. It's not that. I mean, this is where I always tell the story about when I two different examples. When I got raped one time when I was like 29, 25 actually, doesn't matter what. I won't tell you about that story. It doesn't matter. I've said it somewhere. But the other one was when I got held up with a gun by a dude in New York. This is an example of, I didn't mean to do it. It just happens, my personality. So I was able to deal with it really well. So that's what I've learned from it since. In other words, there I was walking. It's a funny story, actually. It's time to go home soon, but never mind. It was a funny story because my sister and I, Jan, had been in London at the time with radical lefty political activists, you know. And Janet, especially, we into it sounds hilarious. We're into stealing. We'd go down Oxford Street in London at Christmas time and steal from all the big shops. We're very humble stealers, maybe a couple of £100, you know, a few $100, because we had all this whole policy with these radical lefties, this whole policy of stealing from the rich to help the poor. I mean, it was ridiculous, but that was how we thought. So anyway, poor Janet got caught. It was really terrible. I never got caught. Anyway, the point was, we came to New York. It was in mid-74. I was about 20, I was like nearly 30, and Jan was 31. And at that time, I mean, I learned later the paranoia in New York about violence, and women walked around with bells around their necks, and New Yorkers have about 4 different locks on their doors. I've never seen anything like the locks on doors in New York. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. 4 different bars and things and padlocks, and I mean, unbelievable. And it was just an expression of paranoia. I never met such paranoid people in my whole life. And I went to New York, right? So then so one night we're in this Irish bar on the Lower East Side, and we're walking home on the Lower East Side, which is where all the gangs are. And I mean, people would have been terrified. We would have, had police escorts. We didn't know. We're just naive. We're walking home, and Janet was still into stealing a bit, and she had her glass of wine from the bar, right? So we're walking back home, and she's got a glass of wine. This dude comes out of nowhere, and I suddenly find a gun in my chest, and this dude's saying, "Give me your money, bitch," So this comedy ensued. I mean, I'm just the kind of person, people, how dare they insult me? How dare they kind of trying to attack me? And I mean, it's just a little girl I was like this, So I remember the main pieces of the story was this young dude, and he was not much taller than me. And you get very alert and very instinctive, right? So first there's a bit of fear, and then all my fear channeled into this kind of logic and aggression. And I saw this dude, and I thought, this guy's more scared than I am, definite, and this gun right there between my breasts. Give me your money, right? So then I argued with him. I started arguing. I said, "Excuse me, mate. Excuse me." I said, "We're just as poor as you. Why don't you give me your money? Who you think you are? How dare you?" I'll give me a lecture like I'm his mum, And then every now and again, Janet's saying, "Hey, brother, have some wine." "I don't want your wine. I want your money." This hilarious comedy, right? And of course, the poor American dude hearing an English accent is just too much for their mind. He couldn't get over what the hell is going on. So this ridiculous thing, and Janet kept saying, "Give him some money." I said, "No, you give him your money. Give me your money, mate." It was like too much for his mind, He gave up in the end, and I didn't dislike this fellow. I rather liked this poor guy, Janet offering his wine, "Give him some money." "No, you give me your money." "Give me your money," but no. And in the end, he shrugged, and I remember I had this very this lovely pink, kind of scarlety pink Indian jacket on. And he must have been stoned, because he ran his finger very gently, not aggressively, down between my breasts, and he wandered off into the night. He gave up. He was too shocked, So what I'm telling you is, what I learned from that, when there's no fear, there is no suffering. So how fortunate I am. I learned that, right? I learned it. When there's no fear, that was my party story. There's no suffering. When there's no fear, there's no... In other words, I became the boss. He became the one with his tail between his legs, So I'm saying several things here. It's just fortunate that my mind is like that. It was just, my aggression can be advantage, in other words, But I can see that, because in my life, always has been that way. I mean, I've got fears like everybody, because until I realize emptiness, but I don't have fear of violence for some reason. I'm not scared of men. I've got a lot of boy energy. I must be, I'm not scared. I mean, one of the sufferings of being female is we're scared of men. Men loom large. And that's what I remembered when I went into prison to help when I was a Buddhist, I think, at the time. Yeah, I was. And I did a talk with all these men who'd in there for domestic violence, beating up their wives. But I'm a bully. I understand anger. I understand violence. I understand in my own nature. So I remember having such sympathy, such empathy with these boys, because this is the karma. When we understand karma about male and female karma, some aspect of it. I mean, I'm 5 foot tall. Okay? I'm a little girl. I sound like a bit 6 foot tall when I talk, and people, I stand up, they get a shock. They think my legs have been cut off, They expect me to be 6 feet tall. So anyway, the point is, what was I saying? Yeah, men have some karma. They've got deep voice and they're taller, usually, not always, isn't it? So then women who are little and skinny and little high voices, think of what I'm saying, I'm cliched, but we give this power to these people with these tall bodies, and these dudes, they were like little boys in big bodies. So I had such empathy for them, because I understand how they feel being bullies. So if you've got a typical man and you've got a typical woman, I'm just not trying to be, politically incorrect here. A typical woman who's got lots of fear and afraid, and a little victim, and who's scared and wants to please the hubby, and he whacks her around, oh, he still really loves me, and he whacks her around again. The cliched kind of a relationship. Then the man, she's giving him all this power, and then she becomes afraid of him. I know people are afraid of me. So when I was a little girl, I'd be so upset that people would be afraid of me, because they were giving me more power than I thought I had. Are we communicating here, So are we communicating here or not? I'm just sounding weird. So then I really understand the one of the male and female one, because I can feel I'm more like a boy sometimes, because I've never had fear of male violence. I don't care, I even hitched around Europe when I was 25 on my own with my high heels and my short skirt in Italy. I mean, I don't want to go into details, but the men thought they'd won the lottery. But I didn't care. I just decided, okay, I want to hitch around Europe. I'm going to hitch around Europe. Stupid old men in there. I have to be careful not to be rude here. Are we communicating at all or not, people? I'm saying very weird things today. This is like confession time. It's 6 o'clock and time to go home, for God's sake. So we've got to all be brave. We've got to get past being victims. It's not blaming victims. We've got to realize we've got unbelievable power, all of us. And that means we can give up attachment, give up anger, give up arrogance, give up pride, give up jealousy. And that is the solution to stopping suffering and getting happiness. That's what Buddha's telling us. But it's like a minefield because we think the opposite. So slowly, people, just be brave, one step at a time, you know. Which means, of course, you can be like, I was aggressive with this dude. I was aggressive. If you'd seen us from the distance, you would have thought, who's that awful woman being so rude to this boy? Honestly, you would have, because I was the one pointing my finger and shouting at him. You get my point here? But he had the gun between my breasts. Anyway, food for thought. Okay, people. Goodbye, and thank you so much, and much love. And that's a whole hour. And if there's even 1% something useful there out of my rantings and ravings, then do it, okay? Much love, everybody. I remember one person who saw my nephew's movie about me, Chasing Buddha. And he said, it's a movie for hopeless cases. I thought, well, I'm very happy I'm an example for hopeless cases. I'm glad about that, okay? All right,
Thank you,
people.
Venerable.
Much love, darlings. See you all.
Thank you, Venerable.